Hello there, good morning and welcome to another exciting episode of China Now, your favorite current affairs and news talk show that brings you all the scoop on China and how it's faring as a rising global power and also what China is up to in the field of science and technology. My name is Makiza Latifa. Let's begin with China Currents. We'll have Lisa bring us the weekly news report of what's been trending in China this week, which will start with China's support of the United Nations General Assembly's latest resolution over Palestine. This segment also includes the meeting between Chinese Foreign Minister Wang and South Korean Foreign Minister Tae-yul. Stay with us for more details.
China Currents is a weekly news talk show from China to the world. We cover viral news about China every week and also give you the newest updates on China's cutting-edge technologies. Let's get started.
Hi, welcome to China Currents. I'm Lisa. Let's start this episode with a message on Palestine from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. On the 13th of May, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang said that China supports the United Nations General Assembly's latest resolution over Palestine and urged relevant countries to stop standing on the opposite side of the international community, international justice, and conscience of humanity. Stop creating hurdles for Palestine to join the UN, Wang said. Wang's remark comes after the General Assembly's latest resolution regarding the Middle Eastern country, which vows support to the Palestinian bid to become a full UN member. The resolution, which recognized Palestine as qualified to join and recommended the Security Council to reconsider the matter favorably, was passed on May the 10th by landslide, with 143 votes in favor and only 9 against. Naturally, the US and Israel are among the 9 negative votes. Regarding its decision, the US representative to the UN explained that, believe it or not, the US has always been the biggest fan of the two-state solution. Sweet enough, they're just voting against it for the sake of the Palestinian people, because, and I quote, statehood will come from a process that involves direct negotiation between the parties. There is no other path that guarantees either Israel's security and future as a democratic Jewish state, or Palestinians can live in peace and dignity in a state of their own. In other words, you have to get Israel's consent to become a state first before talking about joining the UN. But as the Chinese Foreign Ministry mentioned, at current condition, being a full membership in the UN is actually a crucial step towards Palestinians' long-cherished aspirations of independent statehood. Only that will enable the international community to listen more adequately to the voice of Palestine and help it to talk and negotiate with Israel on a more equal footing, especially in the current state of Israeli occupation and suppression. The passing of the solution is the strong core of the international community to support the Palestinian cause in terms of both the two-state solution and lasting peace in the Middle East, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson explained. As for the US excuses, borrowing from the dude in Big Lebowski,
yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Next up, let's take a look at US latest tariff against Chinese products. On May the 14th, the Biden administration announced that starting this year, the US will quadruple tariffs on imported Chinese electric vehicles from 25% to 100%. The tariff rate on lithium-ion EV batteries will more than triple to 25%, and the import tax on Chinese solar cells and semiconductors will both be doubled to 50%. On Chinese internet, netizens are mostly joking at the following picture. Besides mocking poor Biden, the US move is largely viewed as a desperate attempt to contain China's leadership in the mentioned industries. In Trump's era, the US sanctioned China to secure its lead in technology, but now it is more of a move to protect its underdevelopment EV industry. The US, despite being a giant in combustion engines, is only a dwarf in EV. Time has changed, netizen commented. As for the effect of the new tax barrier, netizens generally don't consider them a threat. Although China would probably be sad for a moment since the US has the largest auto market in the world, the reality is if you look at where the growth of auto market is, it's either the developing countries or where population continues to grow rapidly. EV only occupies a small portion in US auto sales, and its infrastructure for EV is immature to say the least. The US has actually gone through a wave where EVs became very popular. But people quickly realized that the US don't have an electronic grid that can handle all of the charging. And a replanning of power infrastructure would definitely require a well-thought-out centralized approach, something that the US doesn't have thanks to the chaotic bipartisan politics. China now is the #1 manufacturer not only in EVs but also in the batteries themselves, which are basically the engines of the EVs. As conserving the environment has established its position as the global consensus, US tariff barriers will only prevent its consumers to get hold of the best product in the market. Next up, what name will pop up when you think about the word aurora? Iceland, Alaska? Thanks to the strongest geomagnetic storm in 2 decades, Chinese could now see aurora without having to bear the burden of a 10-hour flight. From northwestern Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region to northeastern Heilongjiang Province, multiple northern regions across China has become unexpected destinations to enjoy the stunning beauty of the aurora, attracting visitors and photographers to rush for the mesmerizing display by the nature. Due to a coronal massive ejection event from the sun, the Earth's magnetic field experienced a massive geomagnetic storm on the night of May 10th. At 9:32 a.m. on May 11th, the China Meteorological Administration issued a red alert for geomagnetic storms, predicting moderate to high solar activity levels in the following days. Here are some videos taken by photographers and tourists across China. Next up, diplomacy. The Chinese Foreign Ministry announced on May 14th that at the invitation of Chinese President Xi Jinping, Russian President Vladimir Putin will pay a state visit to China from May 16th to 17th. As of the moment, President Putin has touched down in Beijing and is in talks with President Xi Jinping. A joint statement titled On Deepening China-Russia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership of Coordination for a New Era is published. The detail of the visit is still yet to be released. On Chinese internet, state media says that the visit will have strategic significance for not only the two major powers, but also the world amid turbulence and profound changes. Notably, this is Putin's first state visit after he was sworn in as Russian president for a new term last week. As this year marks the 75th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and Russia, Chinese media projects that Xi and Putin will exchange views on bilateral relations, cooperation in various fields, and international and regional issues of common concerns during the visit. Next up, on May 13th, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang met South Korean Foreign Minister Tae-yul, who began a 2-day visit to China that marks the first trip to Beijing by a South Korean foreign minister in more than 6 years. According to the Chinese state media Global Times, Cho's trip is part of the preparation for the China-Japan-South Korea trilateral leaders meeting, which is projected to be held later this month. Meanwhile, Cho aims to make an improvement-oriented adjustment in South Korea's foreign policy, with its relations with China needing to be eased and reconciled. Study and improve neighborly relations are conducive to regional security and stability, the Chinese state media noted. In the meeting, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang said that healthy and stable development of China-South Korea relations is in line with the trend of the times and in the fundamental interest of the two peoples. The recent ups and downs and challenges faced by bilateral relations have increased significantly. This is not in line with the common interest of the two countries, and it is something we do not want to see. The downs that the Foreign Minister Wang mentioned refers to the South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's attitude towards Taiwan. Yoon once claimed in an interview last year that Taiwan is more of an international issue rather than China's domestic politics, which was immediately refuted by China. In his meeting with the Chinese foreign minister, Cho pointed out that South Korea doesn't perceive foreign relations as a zero-sum relationship. He said South Korea is willing to enhance mutual trust, expand consensus, and focus on cooperation with China, thus avoiding geopolitical constraints as much as possible and jointly opening up a new situation of bilateral cooperation. Still on diplomacy, on May 14th, a delegation comprising of 20 senior commissioned officers from the Chinese People's Liberation Army embarked on a week-long visit to Japan to conduct exchanges with Japanese Self-Defense Force. The Chinese state media Global Times said that this visit, the first of its kind in 4 years, reflects the mutual willingness of China and Japan to deepen defense exchanges and foster momentum to stabilize bilateral relations. The Sasakawa Peace Foundation of Japan announced last Friday that the exchange activity between the JSDF and the PLA is taking place from May 14th to 20th. During their visit in Japan, PLA officers are scheduled to visit the Japanese Ministry of Defense, the Komaki Air Base of Japan Air Self-Defense Force. According to Chinese state media, the said military exchange program between China and Japan was first established in 2001, but suspended due to both COVID and the deterioration of political relations between the two countries. In other words, the restart of the exchange is a signal of an improved bilateral relations. Starting from last year, Sino-Japan relations have shown signs of bottoming out and gradually rebound. While negative factors affecting bilateral relations, for instance Japan's dumping of nuclear-contaminated wastewater and some Japanese politicians' hyping of Taiwan questions still exist, both sides have maintained some exchanges and gradually restored relations. Last but not least, let's turn to technology. Chinese researchers from Harbin Engineering University have announced a major breakthrough in submarine technology with the successful development of a laser propulsion system. This disruptive innovation marks a significant departure from traditional propeller shafts and screws, utilizing advanced laser pulses and slender optical fibers to generate remarkable thrust comparable to commercial jet engines. The Chinese scientific community is buzzing with excitement over the potential of this technology, particularly in the realm of steel submarine propulsion. The system operates smoothly with just 2 megawatts of laser power, well within the limits of nuclear submarines. This relatively modest power requirement produces an astonishing thrust of 70,000 newtons, a feat previously thought unattainable. Known as underwater fiber laser-induced plasma detonation wave propulsion, this revolutionary technology employs laser to generate plasma underwater, which in turn creates powerful detonation waves to propel the submarine forward. These capabilities are so extraordinary that it could enable submarines to navigate the depths at speeds far surpassed current limits. Additionally, this laser-based propulsion system eliminates the persistent issues of mechanical vibrations, which have long compromised the stealth capability of submarines. While the concept of underwater laser propulsion was proposed by Japanese scientists 2 decades ago, the low propulsion efficiency has hindered progress until now. Led by the School of Mechatronics Engineering at Harbin Engineering University, the research team has successfully overcome this challenge by expertly focusing and guiding the laser-generated plasma through a unique mechanism. The key innovation lies in utilizing a high-energy laser emitted from an optical fiber thinner than a human hair to generate bubbles through seawater evaporation, an effect known as supercavitation. This process significantly reduces water resistance. Simultaneously, the laser creates plasma in the water and simultaneously triggers an explosion wave. The team's breakthrough is in harnessing this challenging multidirectional detonation wave to provide directional thrust for the submarine. The solution involves ejecting tiny spherical metal particles and applying the detonation force to propel the vehicle in opposite direction. As these metal particles exit one end of the underwater vehicle, the laser pulse propels the submarine forward. This technology also holds promise for underwater weapon system, as the supercavitation phenomenon can substantially enhance the range of underwater projectiles, missiles, and torpedoes. In a recent publication in Chinese journal, engineers revealed that submarines utilizing this technology could be coated with ultra-thin, ultra-fine optical fibers, each thinner than a human hair. These fibers are capable of emitting lasers, further showcasing the remarkable potential of this innovation. While significant progress has been made, several challenges remain before this technology can be fully implemented in military submarines. Effectively managing laser-generated heat, ensuring the durability of optical fiber in extreme deep-sea conditions, and seamlessly integrating the system with existing submarine structures are among the hurdles that need to be overcome. Furthermore, while laser technology eliminates noise from mechanical vibrations, the supercavitation bubbles themselves may generate detectable sound, potentially making the submarine vulnerable to sonar detection. This raises questions about the feasibility of its military applications. Nevertheless, the commercial prospects of this technology are vast, with the potential to revolutionize ship propulsion and contribute to more environmentally friendly and efficient maritime travel. Continued research effort and technological refinements gave us confidence that laser propulsion system will bring about a profound transformation in submarine technology in the not-too-distant future. The age of laser-driven, silent, and highly advanced submarine propulsion may have just dawned. That is all for today. Thank you for watching this episode of China Currents. If you have any thoughts and comments about our show, please reach us at the email below. I am Lisa, looking forward to hearing from you, and see you next time.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up is the Thinkers Forum. This week, we present to you a feature story on the appointment of Andrey Belousov as Russia's Minister of Defense on May 12, 2024.
On May 12th, Putin appointed Andrey Belousov, Russia's former first deputy prime minister, as the new Minister of Defense. Why would an economist with no military service experience be chosen for such a position amid the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict? Military strategist Professor Wang analysis reveals that the appointment marks Russia's strategic pivot in the new phase of the conflict, with significant implications for the US elections. Here are his thoughts. While many media reports focus on Belousov's lack of military experience, few have noted his success in countering Western economic sanctions while serving as deputy prime minister. This indicates a great deficiency in understanding of the essence of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and consequently, its future trajectory. Deng Xiaoping, who directed numerous battles and served in China's top leadership, once said that logistics determines the course of war. In today's context, we can say that a country's economy determines the course of war. Russia is now at a crossroads where the relationship between its economy and its defense budget needs closer examination. Considering Russia's hefty defense budget, which already takes up 6.7% of its GDP, the continued support to Ukraine from the United States in hopes of prolonging the war, and the NATO Secretary General's nonchalance about another 5 years of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the long-term nature of the Russia-Europe conflict seems inevitable. When I was invited to attend the Multipolarity Forum in Moscow this March, I noticed that Russia didn't fully commit its economy to war. I'd say that despite the initial ambition for a quick victory in the early stages of the conflict, Putin now realizes it's more of a tug-of-war where opponents also have a say in which cards to play. What cards are his opponents putting down? Biden's recent $60 billion aid package for Ukraine sends a clear signal that the US cannot accept a complete Ukrainian defeat, at least not before the US elections. If Russia continues to pursue a quick victory, it will need to commit more resources and troops. thereby weakening Russia's national capabilities as the US hopes. On the front line, Russia has already gained the upper hand, and it is unlikely that Ukraine will have the chance to turn the tide. Therefore, as long as Russia maintains military pressure on Ukraine while enhances its own economy, it can draw Ukraine into a favorable war of attrition. To pave the way for ultimate victory, Russia is already focusing on restoring its industrial manufacturing capacity, especially in the military sector. What Russia needs now is a defense minister who is knowledgeable about economics and adept at navigating American financial sanctions to secure the prospect of ultimate victory. For the United States, this is exactly the scenario it had hoped to avoid. On one hand, this is extremely detrimental to the global status of the US dollar. When the US expelled Russia from the SWIFT network, Russia was compelled to develop its own transaction channels, resulting in trades with China settled in Russian rubles or Chinese yuan. To the dismay of the West, the more it hopes to delay Ukraine's defeat and the more sanctions it imposes on Russia, the more decoupling between Russia's oil and grain from the US dollar will occur, leading to an embrace of the Chinese yuan instead. At last year's BRICS summit, an advisor to President Putin proposed establishing an alternative to the SWIFT system within BRICS countries. While challenging due to the need for coordination among multiple nations, such a system is necessary and beneficial for both China and Russia. It could also further internationalize the Chinese yuan. The need for de-dollarization is made all the more imperative by American politicians' recent visits to China, such Antony Blinken and Janet Yellen, who came with an attempt to threaten China regarding its future engagement with Russia by intervening even in trade between private companies between China and Russia. Therefore, I suggest that China's banking system envision its future not solely based on technicalities, but rather in the context of great power competition. Even if only a few countries were to join the effort of de-dollarization, it could help bypass the dollar in oil trade among China, Iran, and other Central Asian countries, posing a deterrence to American financial hegemony. Moreover, if the US were to resort to financial sanctions against China, this initiative could also serve as an important buffer. On the other hand, the Ukraine quagmire is damaging Biden's political career. The Ukraine war is a result of Biden administration's delicate orchestration. Admitting Ukraine's defeat would signify a strategic failure for Biden's team, which is highly unfavorable for Biden's election prospects. Therefore, until the US election is over, more money from American taxpayers will be pumped into PR projects aimed at delaying the acknowledgement of Ukraine's ultimate defeat. With regard to the Ukraine war, the interest of the Biden administration is parting ways with those of the United States. To retain its minimal interests in Europe, such as Hunter Biden's company in Ukraine, the Biden administration is leading the US to risk its future of global hegemony by engaging in a full confrontation or even a proxy war with a country the size of Russia. Thus, Trump is likely assessing the situation from the perspective of national interests when he boldly claims that he could end the Russia-Ukraine conflict within 24 hours. We can also imagine that a president with a background as a real estate businessman would likely have more in common with an economist.
And that's all for the Thinkers Forum. Next on the show is the Global Arena. Let's listen to this editorial by Charles Liu, who is a senior fellow at the Taihe Institute.
After decades of turbulence and turmoil in the Middle East, finally the countries are looking at peaceful coexistence and co-development, mutually beneficial development. And much of it is under the auspices of the Belt and Road Initiative. Look at the latest development in Iraq, for example, after the total destruction by US forces of their infrastructure and facilities and the killing of hundreds of thousands of people. Finally, it's restoring order and redevoting itself to development. And this is very significant because Iraq, like the other countries in the region, actually have quite a bit of natural resources, significant amount of oil and gas. The government just put up for tender a couple of dozen sites for oil and gas development, especially gas. And what's significant is that winning the bids, Chinese companies won 10 of the bids, and it's the only foreign country that actually succeeded in winning bids in the process. Many European energy companies also participated in the bid, and local companies as well. And this is a very integral part of the Belt and Road Initiative of the Chinese government to help and develop industry, develop resources along the Belt and Road countries, and Iraq is certainly one of them. And in addition to these, there have been many projects, hospitals and schools and so on, which have been under construction in Iraq after the devastation of the Iraq War. And much of this is also done by Chinese companies, again, as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. Just in Iraq alone, we can see the destruction wreaked havoc on Iraq by the US forces, by the American invaders. The rebuilding effort is by China. China is not out there to wear and tear everything down. China is out there to build, to construct, to improve the livelihood of the people. With Iraq, with Saudi Arabia, and with many other countries in the Middle East, what we see, China promoting investment, trade, building of infrastructure, improving of even political relationships in the sense of multilateralism, globalization, and multipolar world. I think this is very clear, and this is clear for all to see, the difference between the Chinese approach and the US approach of continued wanting to dominate over a region. I think the Belt and Road has proven that it is possible to be mutually beneficial, unlike the US approach of you win, I lose, I win, you lose. And they cannot think in terms of a multilateral, mutually beneficial relationship. But I think the Chinese approach is now recognized to be a positive one. Peace, stability, trade, and mutual benefit. I think what is happening in Iraq in terms of the Chinese companies winning the bids is, again, a positive indication of how mutually beneficial collaboration can continue and expand.
And the second part of the Global Arena features Peter Walker, the author of the book titled Powerful, Different, Equal.
This is Pete Walker, and I've been asked to share thoughts on the decision just made by the US to apply 100% tariffs to EVs coming in from China. And the question is, why now? And the other question is, what are the implications going forward for China and for the US? So let me start with a little bit of history, because I think it's important to understand the unique role that the auto industry has played in the history of the US. The auto industry is really started in the US by Henry Ford in the early 1900s. So the US has always thought of its auto industry as the backbone of its industrial capabilities. And you're now looking at a rapid turnover of the auto industry from the combustion engine to electric vehicles. This is a very hot election issue. So if you go back to when Trump first put tariffs on China, Biden's response, which actually was totally true, but he's since changed his tune, is that tariffs are nothing more than a tax on consumer, because at the end, all it does is raise price, and that price increase is borne by consumers. So what Biden did really was retain the tariffs that were put in place by Trump, and then he added another whole dimension to the issue, which was blocking China from getting access to high-end advanced technologies from the US, especially in areas related to chips. So the why now is we're in the middle of a very heated election in the US. And so I think you're seeing China as a front and center issue. EVs are a front and center issue because everyone now realized that China has become the dominant EV producer globally. To protect the US auto industry, tariffs are put in place basically for that reason. Longer term, it's not going to be effective at the end of the day, but people in the political world don't think longer term. I think the deeper question that needs to be put on the table is how does the US think about what China is doing? And if you read the press over time, the US basically has taken the position that China is subsidizing many industries, especially the EV industry. And by subsidizing, I think most of us would interpret that as an ongoing subsidy that basically means they're not able to sell their product and recover their full cost. That's not the reality of what has happened in China. What has happened in China is the same model that has happened in major corporations around the world. They look at the future, they think of where the opportunities are and what their relative strategic position is going to be. They invest in R&D and in talent and in partnerships to be able to bring that vision to fruition. The big difference that is never talked about in the US is China has basically invested in getting to this position. And China doesn't need to invest anymore in the EV industry because the industry is growing very rapidly and becoming totally self-sufficient. We've taken a strong position that over time we need to become much more environmentally sensitive, and therefore EVs were a clear target. And so admitting at this point in time that China, which had no auto industry to speak of, if you go back about 15 years ago, has now, by being smart and competent, catapulted to the #1 position in the autos of tomorrow, which are basically EVs. So the US, I think, first and foremost needs to kind of swallow its pride and say, what can we learn from what the Chinese have done? And how do we become competitive? That's not going to be easy. So where does China go from here? First of all, I think China is clearly aware that their product is the best product that's out there, and they're able to produce it at a very attractive price from a strategic point of view. The US has a huge auto market, and I'm sure China resents the idea that China is basically going to be cut out of that market. But the reality is, if you look at where the growth of the auto market is, it's largely in developing countries, and where the population continues to grow at a rapid clip, where the population is relatively younger. So China, I think, has enormous opportunities going forward. They also have the ability for those countries that want to protect their auto industry jobs. China could clearly, as other companies have done, set up manufacturing facilities locally to ensure local employment. So China's position going forward, while it's, I'm sure, disappointing to have the huge US market being carved out, China has more than enough opportunities and a great deal of momentum in terms of the technological advantages that they already have and the brand recognition that they're very rapidly building. So the next question is, where does the US go from here? The core challenge the US faces is that it has adopted a containment strategy towards China, which essentially is we can block their access to US high-end technology and slow them down. The problem is it's very difficult to both contain and compete because it's a very different mindset. So what the US needs to do is to recognize that containment is not going to be possible. As an example, China has more STEM students. Advanced technologies are developed and driven by STEM students. The US has trailed in this area. So what the US, I think, has to do is first and foremost make the mindset change that I suggested, which is compete, not contain. So another challenge for the US is to get over the old taboo of industrial policies are unfair and decide how to apply them effectively in America so we can build areas of sustainable competitive advantage. I think China has a large running head start, not only in EVs, but more importantly in the batteries themselves that are basically the engine of the EVs. And catching them is going to be very difficult. But putting tariffs and preventing US consumers from getting access to Chinese vehicles is not going to do anything for our competitive position globally. And so China is going to continue to dominate the production of EVs right now. China also, I'm sure, has a very well thought out program of charging stations, how many you need, where they are, how it impacts the way highways are designed, etc. And the US, having gone through a wave where EVs became very popular, is quickly discovering that we don't have an electric grid that can handle all of the charging if everybody shifted to that mode of transportation. So the US has got a lot to do, but it's going to require a well thought out, centralized approach and not one that's going to get ripped apart by bipartisan politics, which has been a problem for a number of years now. So I think history will look back on this stage where the US imposed tariffs and say, that was an interesting first response. It's not going to have much long-term impact, and the long-term impact is going to be determined by who sets out to play in the EV world and makes the kind of investments in talent and innovation and partnerships that are required to be successful.
And wrapping up on today's edition of the show, we present to you Speak Softly with Charles.
The other big news out of the Middle East, at least if you look at the social media in China and a number of other places, one was assassination attempt on MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, in which some of his guards have supposedly have been killed. He escaped unharmed. Now, I have to say, at the time when it supposedly occurred, I was actually on the phone to Riyadh. I had several calls to Riyadh. Had nothing to do with this news, of course. But I certainly asked those who were in Riyadh, is there tension? Is there something going on that potentially brings emergency situation on in Riyadh? They all told me, no, there's nothing special. It's life as usual. So it's quite interesting how there's been these massive rumors floating on the internet on how Riyadh may be under emergency control, or such an attempt on the Crown Prince will bring instability to the kingdom. Things are going to be messy. Now, to me, it's really, really absurd. Aside from the normal excitement that the passing of these news on to garner data flow, aside from this side, it's really very interesting how this seems to have an organized effort behind it. The organized effort is, in China at least, it seems to be to say that, oh, Saudi is complicated. It's very dangerous. Don't go there. Don't develop a relationship. Don't do business. Second is a big article in Western press at the beginning of the month, a little more than a week ago, about the grand historical deal that's supposed to be struck between the United States and Saudi Arabia for U.S. to give full security coverage to Saudi Arabia and to provide them with civilian nuclear power, and then to sell them more advanced weapons that they weren't willing to sell before, on condition that Saudi Arabia established diplomatic relations with Israel, and also to move away from China, especially on technology. Now, of course, obviously, this deal, despite the big pronouncements starting at the end of last year when they talked about it, till today, certainly has not come to fruition. This is moving away from China. this is exactly the time when the Minister of Housing of Saudi Arabia is in Beijing, signing a big development project with city construction to produce or to set up a development zone to produce construction material. And another minister is coming this weekend to talk about collaboration on the financial aspect, financial markets. Again, this makes me wonder, somebody is trying to promote the fact that, number one, Saudi Arabia is a dangerous place and should not be a target for Chinese investors or Chinese businessmen. Another aspect that's being promoted is, well, Saudi Arabia is going to move away from China. It's not going to be doing business closely with China anymore. And it's going to fall, once again, fully under the U.S. security coverage. Now, this doesn't benefit China or Saudi Arabia, and we know who could be behind pushing this from the back. I think it's very clear for Saudi Arabia the synergies between the two economies are glaringly simple, and that the mutually supportive trade and investment are beneficial to both sides. And after all, Saudi Arabia is the largest producer of oil to China. You don't play politics with your biggest customer. In the old days, the United States was the biggest customer of Saudi oil. But with shale gas and shale oil in the U.S. becoming self-sufficient, what we have is a situation, your previous biggest customer has now become no longer a customer, but even a competitor in the international market to your product. So I think from logic, from politics, declaring more independent, will not take side, do not believe in zero-sum games. These are all words from Saudi senior officials as recent as last week. I think the situation between Saudi Arabia and China will only continue to improve, and the trading of goods and also the mutual investment into each other's countries will continue to proceed apace, including the possibility of the two countries jointly investing in the third country, as exemplified by what happened with Pakistan last week. So I'm not at all pessimistic. I'm not thinking about all these fake news that's floating around the internet. I'm seeing concrete things, and the concrete things points to even better future between trade and investment between China and Saudi Arabia.
And that's all for the show today. Please do not forget to share with us your comments, thoughts, and feedback through the email provided below. My name is Makiza Latifa. Thank you very kindly for spending your morning with us here on China Now. See you same time next week.